The sun had barely risen when Alice Pereira opened her eyes on that decisive Monday morning. The city was still half asleep, wrapped in a soft gray light, and for a few seconds she lay still, staring at the ceiling of her modest bedroom, listening to the distant hum of traffic beginning to grow. Before the alarm clock could even buzz, her delicate fingers reached out and pressed the button. She had barely slept. Nervous anticipation had kept her drifting in and out of a shallow rest throughout the night. Today was not just another day. It was her first day as an intern at Denise Enterprises, the largest and most powerful company in the city. Careful not to wake her younger sister, who slept in the next room, Alice rose silently from bed. The small apartment they shared in the suburbs was quiet, almost fragile in the early hours. Through the narrow bedroom window, she could still see the city lights glowing faintly, scattered like stars against the darkness that slowly retreated. Standing in front of the mirror, Alice studied her reflection. Her expressive brown eyes revealed a mix of anxiety and determination, emotions she tried hard to balance. She ran a brush through her light brown hair, styled in a classic bob cut she had chosen specifically for this new phase of her life. It made her look more serious, more professional, more like the woman she hoped to become. At 25, freshly graduated in business administration, Alice knew how much this opportunity meant. It wasn't just a job. It was a door opening. Today is the day, she whispered to herself, adjusting the only white blouse she owned, bought in installments with money she had saved from giving private lessons. A gray pencil skirt and simple black shoes completed the outfit she had planned meticulously days in advance. Across the city, in stark contrast to Alice's quiet morning, Luis Felipe Diniz was already finishing his intense workout in the private gym of his luxurious penthouse. His athletic body glistened with sweat as he ran on a state-of-the-art treadmill, eyes fixed on the sunrise beyond the massive floor-to-ceiling windows. At 37, the CEO of Denise Enterprises lived by discipline and control. Every minute of his day was calculated. The faint streaks of gray at his temples, damp with sweat, only reinforced the authority he naturally exuded. His reflection in the mirror showed a man at the peak of physical condition, sharp jawline, broad shoulders, commanding presence. Yet his dark eyes carried a coldness that discouraged closeness. "Mr. Diniz, your breakfast is served," announced the housekeeper through the intercom. "I'll be there in 5 minutes," he replied curtly, his deep, authoritative voice echoing through the silent apartment. As he prepared for another demanding day, Luis Felipe mentally reviewed his schedule. A meeting with shareholders, financial reports, strategic decisions, and according to his assistant, a new group of interns starting that morning. He frowned slightly at the thought. He despised disruptions to routine, especially inexperienced young people who slowed productivity. Adjusting his Italian silk tie in the mirror, he allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction. His charcoal gray, custom-made Giorgio Armani suit emphasized his imposing posture perfectly. Since his divorce 3 years earlier, he had devoted himself entirely to work, turning Denise Enterprises into an even greater empire. There was no room for emotional distractions in his life. Meanwhile, Alice stood on a crowded bus, clutching her folder tightly against her chest, careful not to wrinkle her carefully pressed clothes. The soft scent of her perfume, bought on sale, mixed with the various odors of public transportation. Through the fogged-up window, she watched the buildings grow taller and more imposing as the bus approached the financial district. Her heart raced when she finally saw it. The mirrored tower of Denise Enterprises rose majestically against the morning sky, 50 floors of glass and steel that seemed to touch the clouds. Alice took a deep breath as she stepped off the bus, her stomach fluttering with nerves. "You can do this," she murmured, adjusting her hair as the wind tried to undo her careful effort. At the same time, Luis Felipe's black Porsche glided through the streets with effortless dominance. Inside the luxurious car, he savored the silence, his mind already fully immersed in the day's demands. The scent of leather and expensive cologne filled the air. He parked in his private space in the underground garage and checked his gold Rolex. 7:45 a.m. As always, early. He liked arriving before everyone else, watching his empire awaken. In the building's grand lobby, Alice handed her documents to the receptionist, her hands trembling slightly. The polished marble floor reflected the soft lighting, while the murmur of arriving employees created an atmosphere of controlled energy. "Miss Pereira?" A well-dressed, middle-aged woman approached. "I'm Beatrice, the internship program coordinator. Please come with me." Alice followed her, heels echoing against the floor as they crossed the lobby toward the elevators. Her reflection in the mirrored cabin showed a young woman trying hard to appear calm, even as her heart pounded wildly. On the 48th floor, Luis Felipe stood by the windows of his presidential office, overlooking the city. Morning sunlight bathed the elegant space in golden tones, reflecting off the Italian designer furniture. "Excuse me, Mr. Diniz," his assistant said carefully. "The new interns are arriving. Would you like me to organize a presentation meeting?" "That won't be necessary," he replied without turning. "Just make sure they understand the rules and don't interfere with the company's operations." On the 20th floor, Alice was introduced to her workstation, an organized desk, a modern computer, and a partial view of the city. She placed her bag down, overwhelmed by the reality of finally being there. "Alice," Beatrice called, "I'll explain your first tasks. Mr. Diniz is extremely demanding when it comes to quality, so pay close attention." At the mention of the CEO's name, a shiver ran down Alice's spine. She had seen his photos in business magazines, intimidating, untouchable. She had no idea that within minutes their paths would cross in a way that would alter both their lives forever. The soft chime of the executive elevator announced its arrival on the 20th floor. The doors opened silently, revealing the imposing figure of Luis Felipe Diniz. His woody cologne filled the space before he even stepped onto the gray carpet. Alice was organizing her desk when she sensed a sudden shift in the atmosphere. Conversations faded. The office fell into respectful silence. She looked up and froze. Less than 10 meters away stood Luis Felipe Diniz in all his authority. His tailored suit hugged his broad shoulders perfectly, and the silver at his temples only intensified his commanding presence. His dark eyes scanned the room with calculated coldness. "Beatrice," his deep voice cut through the silence. "I want a full report on the new interns on my desk by the end of the day." Alice's hands trembled as she pretended to shuffle papers. His cologne grew stronger as he approached. "And you," he said, stopping in front of her desk. She looked up abruptly. "Alice Pereira, sir," she replied, standing quickly and nearly dropping her pen. "The new intern in the finance department." His gaze traveled over her in a cold, meticulous assessment that made her feel exposed, as if every detail had been analyzed. Her knees shook under the intensity of his stare. "I hope you understand, Miss Pereira," he said, his voice carrying a clear warning, "that at Diniz Enterprises we do not tolerate mistakes or distractions. Every employee, including interns, must maintain the highest standard of excellence." She swallowed hard, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "Yes, sir. You can trust my commitment to the company." For a brief second, something flickered in his dark eyes. Surprise, perhaps, at the firmness of her voice despite her obvious nervousness. But it vanished quickly, replaced by his usual mask of indifference. "We'll see," he replied, turning away. Alice sat back down, her legs barely supporting her weight. His scent lingered in the air, a tangible presence that made her skin tingle. "Don't let him intimidate you," Beatrice whispered later. "Mr. Diniz may seem harsh, but he's fair. Do a good job and he'll notice." Alice nodded, still shaken. There was something about him, beyond his striking appearance and intimidating authority, that intrigued her deeply. Perhaps a loneliness hidden behind that cold facade. In his office, Luis Felipe caught himself thinking about the new intern. There was something different about her, a genuine determination in her eyes, a quiet dignity that stood out, even beneath simple clothes, and that, unexpectedly, unsettled him. He shook his head, pushing those thoughts away with force. Distraction was a luxury he could not afford, especially not with employees, and certainly not with an intern. Control had always been his greatest strength, and he refused to allow anything, or anyone, to threaten it. In the days that followed, Alice threw herself into work with relentless determination. She was resolved to prove her worth. Her agile fingers flew across the keyboard as she organized spreadsheets, updated reports, and double-checked every figure with obsessive attention to detail. The quiet hum of the air conditioner and the constant aroma of freshly brewed coffee became her only companions during the long hours she spent at her desk. Luis Felipe, on the other hand, found himself watching the new intern more often than he cared to admit. From his office, separated by glass walls, he could see Alice leaning over her work, completely absorbed. Her brown hair would fall softly over her focused face, especially during the more hectic afternoons, and something about her concentration unsettled him. One particularly busy day, during an important executive meeting, Alice was unexpectedly asked to present the financial figures for the last quarter. Her heart raced the moment she stepped into the conference room. She immediately felt Luis Felipe's penetrating gaze settle on her. "Miss Pereira," his deep voice filled the room, commanding attention. "Show us your analysis." Alice took a deep breath. The delicate scent of her lotion mixed with the woody aroma that seemed to surround Luis Felipe, seated only a few meters away. With a steady voice, despite her wildly pounding heart, she began. "As you can see on this chart," she said, pointing at the screen, her fingers trembling slightly, "there has been a significant increase in revenue within the technology sector." Luis Felipe watched closely, not only the numbers, but the way she carried herself. There was a natural elegance in her movements, a sharp intelligence shining in her brown eyes that intrigued him more with each passing second. "And what about projections for the next quarter?" he asked abruptly, his tone edged with challenge. A shiver ran down Alice's spine at the sound of his voice directed at her, but instead of shrinking, she lifted her chin. "Based on current market trends and projected investments," she replied confidently, "I estimate a 5% growth for the next quarter, sir." Their eyes met in a charged moment. Alice felt heat rise up her neck as Luis Felipe studied her with an unreadable expression. "Interesting," he murmured, a faint note of surprise slipping through his usual composure. "Continue." After the meeting ended and the executives began to leave, Luis Felipe spoke again. "Miss Pereira, a moment." Her heart accelerated as the room emptied, leaving them alone. The silence felt heavy, broken only by the low murmur of the air conditioning. "Your presentation," he began, his voice lower and deeper than usual, "was surprisingly competent." Alice felt her cheeks warm at the unexpected praise. "Thank you, sir. I do my best." He took a few steps closer, his presence dominating the space. His cologne enveloped her like an invisible cloud. "You have potential, Miss Pereira," he said quietly. "Don't waste it." With that, he turned and left the room, leaving Alice standing there with her heart racing and an unfamiliar sensation twisting in her stomach. There was something in his tone, in the way his dark eyes had lingered on her, that disturbed her in a way she couldn't explain. The following week, the office buzzed with preparations for an important presentation to shareholders. Alice was so absorbed in her computer screen that she barely noticed the hours passing. Outside the massive glass windows, the sky had already darkened when she finished reviewing the final numbers. "Still here, Miss Pereira?" Luis Felipe's unexpected voice made her jump in her chair. The office was nearly empty now, the lights dimmed, creating an atmosphere that felt strangely intimate. "Mr. Denise," she replied, steadying herself, "I was just finishing the report for tomorrow." He approached her desk. Without his jacket, sleeves rolled up, his white dress shirt revealed strong forearms. His presence felt more intense in the quiet space. "Let me see," he said, leaning over her shoulder to look at the screen. Alice held her breath. She could feel the warmth of his body so close to hers. Her fingers trembled slightly as she pointed to the data. "Here. This is the comparative analysis you requested," she murmured, her voice softer than she intended. Her subtle perfume reached him, delicate and unsettling. Luis Felipe found himself noticing the graceful curve of her neck, the way a loose strand of hair brushed against her flushed cheek. "Impressive," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "You've been standing out, Miss Pereira." She turned to thank him, and realized too late how close they were. Their gazes locked, and for a moment, Time seemed to freeze. His dark eyes held a different glint now, something intense, almost predatory, that made Alice's stomach flip. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words died when she noticed his gaze flicker briefly to her lips. Something stirred inside Luis Felipe. Something long dormant. Her closeness, her scent, the slight tremble of her parted lips. It all pulled at him in a way that was deeply unsettling. Abruptly he stepped back, running a hand through his graying hair. "It's late," he said, his tone snapping back into professional distance. "You should go home, Miss Pereira." "Yes, sir," Alice replied, dizzy from the sudden shift in atmosphere. She gathered her things, hands shaking. Luis Felipe remained still for a moment, as if fighting an internal battle, before turning and heading toward his office. Inside the elevator, alone, Alice finally released the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her heart still raced, heat lingering in her cheeks. What was happening to her? Why did that man affect her so deeply? In his office, Luis Felipe poured himself a glass of whiskey, hoping to quiet his thoughts. But Alice's image refused to leave his mind. Her bright brown eyes, her soft lips, the calm strength in her voice. He couldn't allow this. She was his employee, an intern. Too young, too innocent, and yet, something inside him had awakened, something he could no longer ignore. In the days that followed, the air in the office seemed charged with electricity whenever they crossed paths. Every shared glance, every accidental brush sent shivers down Alice's spine. One particularly hectic morning, Alice was in the archive room searching for old documents for an audit. The space was small and enclosed, tall shelves stretching to the ceiling. The smell of paper and dust filled the air as she stretched to reach a blue folder on the highest shelf. "Need some help, Miss Pereira?" Luis Felipe's sudden voice made her jump. She turned quickly to find him standing in the doorway. Her heart pounded when she realized they were alone in the confined space. "Yes, Mr. Denise," she said softly. "I was trying to reach that blue folder." He stepped closer, his tall, athletic frame dominating the narrow room. Alice felt her back press against the shelf as he leaned over her to retrieve the folder. His cologne enveloped her completely, making her head spin. "This one?" he asked, his voice lower, rougher than usual. She lifted her face to answer, and their eyes met. The tension between them was almost tangible. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, see the way his chest rose and fell with heavier breaths. "Yes," she whispered, mesmerized by the intensity in his dark eyes. Luis Felipe didn't move. His gaze traced her delicate features, lingering on her parted lips. One hand still held the folder above her head, while the other rested against the shelf, effectively trapping her between his body and the bookshelves. "Alice," he murmured, her name on his lips for the first time, heavy with restrained emotion. The sound sent a shiver through her. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure he could hear it. Her lips tingled with the closeness of his, her entire body aching for a touch she knew she shouldn't crave. And yet, she did. Slowly, almost against his own will, Luis Felipe leaned in even closer. Their noses were nearly touching now. Alice closed her eyes, her breath catching as she felt the warmth of his breathing brush against her lips. "Mr. Denise?" Sandra's voice echoed from the hallway. "Sir, are you there? The investors have arrived for the meeting." The spell shattered instantly. As if awakening from a trance, Luis Felipe stepped back abruptly. His face, usually so controlled and unreadable, showed clear signs of disturbance. He ran a hand through his graying hair, a nervous gesture Alice had already learned to recognize. "Here's the folder, Miss Pereira," he said, his voice returning to a professional tone, though a faint tremor still lingered beneath it. "Excuse me." Alice remained frozen in place as she watched him leave the archive room in a hurry. Her legs felt weak, barely able to support her. Heat burned her cheeks, her entire body trembling. What was happening to her? Why couldn't she control these sensations whenever he was near? He was her boss. Older, completely forbidden. The following night, a violent storm lashed the city. Alice had stayed late at the office, finishing an urgent report. The sound of rain pounding against the windows amplified the intimacy of the dimly lit space. When she finally finished, it was already past 9. The office was empty, except for the faint light still glowing from Luis Felipe's office. As she gathered her things, her heart raced at the thought that he was still there. A sudden clap of thunder shook the building. The lights flickered, then went out completely. Alice let out a startled gasp, gripping the edge of her desk. "Miss Pereira." Luis Felipe's voice came from nearby, followed by the beam of a flashlight cutting through the darkness. "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice trembling. "I was just finishing the report you asked for." He approached, the flashlight illuminating his path. In the intermittent flashes of lightning, Alice could see his profile sharply outlined against the darkness, shadows dancing over his strong features. "It's not safe for you to leave in the storm," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I can take you home." Alice's heart skipped a beat. The idea of being alone with him in such an intimate space made her stomach twist. "You don't need to trouble yourself, sir. I can take a taxi." "Don't be stubborn, Alice," he said, using her first name again, sending a shiver through her. "I won't let you leave alone in this weather." Another thunderclap made her flinch instinctively, stepping closer to him. In the darkness, she felt the heat radiating from his body, his woody cologne intensified in the enclosed space. "Are you afraid?" he asked quietly. "No," she lied. Another thunderclap betrayed her, drawing her even closer. Luis Felipe switched off the flashlight, plunging them into semi-darkness, illuminated only by occasional lightning. She could feel his presence, strong, protective, so close that only a single step separated their bodies. "Alice," he whispered, her name sounding like a caress. She lifted her face, searching for his eyes. A flash of lightning revealed his intense gaze fixed on her lips. Time seemed to stop. The rain continued to beat against the windows. Thunder shook the building. But in that moment, there was only the charged silence between them. Slowly, as if guided by something stronger than his restraint, Luis Felipe raised a hand and cupped her face. His fingers were warm against her skin, sending shivers through her entire body. "This is madness," he murmured, yet his hand slid to the nape of her neck, fingers threading gently into her hair. "Mr. Denise," she whispered, her voice trembling with restrained emotion. "Luis Felipe," he corrected softly. "When we're alone, call me Luis Felipe." The world seemed to shrink to that moment. His fingers at her neck made Alice tremble. "Luis Felipe." She whispered his name for the first time, startled by the way it felt on her lips. He leaned in further, his breath warm against her skin. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might leap from her chest. "Tell me to stop," he murmured, voice thick with control barely held together. "Tell me this is wrong, that we shouldn't." Instead, Alice lifted a trembling hand and touched his face, feeling the faint roughness of his stubble beneath her fingers. He closed his eyes at her touch, a deep breath escaping him. "I don't want you to stop," she confessed in a whisper. That was all he needed. With a gentle yet decisive movement, Luis Felipe closed the distance between them, capturing her lips in a deep, intense kiss. The first contact felt like electricity surging through them both. Alice's knees weakened, but his strong arms wrapped around her, holding her securely against him. His kiss was firm yet controlled, awakening sensations she had never experienced before. A soft sound escaped her as he deepened the kiss, his hands pressing her closer. "Alice," he murmured against her lips, his hand sliding along her back. "You have no idea how long I've wanted this." Their breathing tangled, hearts pounding in unison. Every touch, every kiss felt charged, as if they were making up for weeks of suppressed longing. His hands traced her waist, igniting heat wherever they touched. A thunderclap broke the moment, pulling him back to reality. Luis Felipe stepped away slightly, though he didn't release her completely. His face showed clear signs of inner conflict and desire. "We need to stop," he said hoarsely. "Not here, not like this." Alice nodded, still dizzy from everything she felt. Her lips were swollen from his kisses, her entire body trembling. The storm, she began. I'll take you home, he replied, running a hand through his hair. Then he held her face gently, his dark eyes intense. But this isn't over. Whatever is happening between us, it's stronger than I can control. The next morning, Alice arrived at the office earlier than usual. Her hands trembled slightly as she organized her desk, replaying every moment of the night before. The taste of his kiss still lingered in her memory, her body reacting at the mere thought of his touch. The familiar sound of the executive elevator made her heart race. In the reflection of the glass, she saw Luis Felipe emerge, impeccable in a navy blue suit. His cologne reached her before he passed her desk. "Good morning, Miss Pereira," he said formally, though his voice was rougher than usual. "Good morning, Mr. Deniz," she replied, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. Their eyes met for a brief second. His gaze dropped to her lips, and she saw the same desire from the night before flicker in his dark eyes, before he turned away and walked firmly toward his office. During the morning meeting, the tension between them was undeniable. Every time Alice spoke, presenting her reports, she could feel Luis Felipe's intense gaze on her. Her hands trembled slightly as she changed the slides. "Excellent work, Miss Pereira," he commented at one point, his professional tone masking the intimacy they now shared. And they both knew nothing would ever be the same again. Alice walked toward the break room in need of a moment alone, her thoughts tangled and her emotions dangerously close to the surface. The day had been heavy, every glance exchanged in the office carrying an unspoken tension she could barely endure. She poured herself a glass of water, trying to steady her breathing. Then she felt it, a presence behind her. Before she could turn around, the familiar scent of his cologne wrapped around her senses, warm and unmistakable. Her heart instantly began to race. "We need to talk," Luis Felipe murmured close to her ear, his voice low, meant only for her. Alice's fingers tightened around the glass. "Mr. Deniz, my office," he interrupted gently but firmly, "at the end of the workday." Their eyes met briefly, the intensity in his gaze sending a shiver through her entire body. Without waiting for an answer, he stepped away, leaving her alone with the echo of his words and the sound of approaching footsteps that forced her to compose herself quickly. The rest of the day dragged painfully. Alice could barely focus on her tasks, her body vibrating with anticipation. Every minute felt stretched, every sound in the office making her jump. When the clock finally signaled the end of the workday and employees began to leave one by one, her heart started pounding even harder. With hesitant steps, she made her way toward Luis Felipe's office. Through the glass walls, she could see him standing near the window, his back turned, gazing out at the city. The sun was setting, bathing the room in golden hues that highlighted the silver strands in his hair and gave him an almost cinematic presence. "Come in, Alice," he said without turning around. Hearing her name from his lips felt like a soft caress, sending a tremor through her. She closed the door behind her, the sound echoing softly in the room. The air felt thick, charged with tension. Luis Felipe finally turned to face her. His dark eyes locked onto hers with such intensity that her heart skipped a beat. "About last night," he began, his voice rough, betraying his own inner turmoil. "What happened?" "I don't regret it," Alice interrupted, surprising both of them with her boldness. Luis Felipe released a deep breath and ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of nervousness. In 3 long strides he crossed the room, stopping just inches from her. "You should," he murmured, his voice low and intense. "I'm your boss, Alice. I'm older. This is—" "And does that really matter?" she asked, lifting her chin to meet his gaze. His scent surrounded her, making her head spin. She could see the battle raging in his eyes, desire clashing with reason. "It does matter," he replied, though his hand was already rising to her face. "It should matter." His fingers were warm against her skin. Alice closed her eyes at the contact, instinctively leaning into his touch. "Luis Felipe." She whispered his name like a prayer. That was his undoing. With a rough groan, he pulled her into his arms, his lips crashing against hers in a desperate kiss. Alice felt her back press against the door as his strong arms held her firmly. This kiss was different from the one before, more urgent, more possessive. His hands moved along her back and waist, leaving fire in their wake. Alice tangled her fingers in his hair, drawing a low sound from his throat. "You have no idea what you do to me," he murmured against her lips, his voice thick with desire. "I can't stop thinking about you." "Then don't," she replied breathlessly, pulling him into another kiss. He lifted her slightly, his hands firm at her waist. Alice wrapped her arms around his neck, completely lost in the sensations he awakened in her. The world outside ceased to exist. There was only them, their kisses, their shared breath. The distant sound of an elevator door snapped them back to reality. They separated abruptly, breathing hard. In the dim light of the office, Alice's hair was slightly tousled, her lips swollen. Luis Felipe didn't look any more composed, his tie loosened and his chest rising and falling heavily. "Have dinner with me," he said suddenly. "Tomorrow night. We need to talk. About this. About us." Still dizzy from desire, Alice nodded. "Okay. I know the perfect place," he continued, his voice low and smooth, his fingers still gently caressing her face. "Elegant, private." "8?" she asked softly. "I'll pick you up," he replied before she could protest. "I want to do this properly." His intense, almost possessive look made her shiver. "8," she agreed. He leaned in and gave her one last kiss, soft and deliberate, completely different from the urgency moments before. By the next evening, Alice stood nervously in her small apartment, finishing her preparations. She had chosen a simple yet elegant black dress, one of the few sophisticated pieces she owned. Her hair fell loosely around her shoulders, her makeup subtle. At exactly 8 o'clock, the doorbell rang. When she opened the door, her breath caught. Luis Felipe stood there in a dark tailored suit, impossibly elegant. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his dark eyes openly admiring as they traveled over her. "You look stunning," he murmured, handing her a bouquet of red roses. In the elevator, his cologne mixed with the scent of the roses, creating an intoxicating atmosphere. Their arms brushed casually, sparks of electricity jumping between them with every accidental touch. Outside, his sleek black Porsche waited. He opened the door for her, his hand resting briefly at her back, sending shivers down her spine. "Nervous?" he asked as he drove, his hand occasionally brushing hers on the center console. "A little," she admitted. "Everything feels so unreal." He smiled, a genuine smile she rarely saw at the office. "I'm nervous too, Alice. You awaken things in me I thought I'd long forgotten." The car glided through the city until it stopped in front of one of the most elegant restaurants in the area, a restored historic mansion surrounded by illuminated gardens, exuding romance and sophistication. "Plemison," Luis Felipe announced, stepping out to open her door. Alice swallowed hard. She had heard of the place, but never imagined she would set foot there. The maître greeted them warmly, clearly recognizing Luis Felipe. "Mr. Denise, your table is ready." They were led through the main hall adorned with crystal chandeliers and elaborate floral arrangements to a more secluded area. Their table sat near a window overlooking the softly lit gardens, candles flickering between them. Luis Felipe pulled out her chair, his fingers brushing lightly against her bare shoulders. The subtle touch made her shiver. "You're tense," he observed once they were seated, his gaze attentive. "I've never been somewhere like this," Alice admitted. His smile softened. "Don't worry about anything tonight. This is about us. Just us." The sommelier approached with the wine list, but Luis Felipe waved it away smoothly. "The Bordeaux, as always." Alice watched him, fascinated, the way his strong fingers held the glass, how the candlelight made his eyes appear even darker, how his deep voice softened whenever he spoke to her. And she knew, without a doubt, that whatever had begun between them was only growing deeper. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, leaning slightly over the table, his voice calm but filled with curiosity. Alice hesitated for a moment before answering. feeling a warm blush slowly rise along her neck. "About how all of this feels like a dream," she finally confessed. "Just a few weeks ago I was nothing more than an intern. And now everything feels different. And now," Luis Felipe completed softly, his voice rough with emotion, "you are the woman who hasn't left my thoughts for a single day. The woman who turned my world upside down with her kindness, her intelligence, her strength." Their gazes met across the table, the tension between them unmistakable, almost tangible. The sommelier returned and poured the wine, its rich aroma filling the air between them. "To us," Luis Felipe proposed the toast, his eyes fixed on hers. "To us," Alice echoed gently, the delicate sound of crystal ringing as their glasses touched. The sommelier stepped away discreetly, leaving them immersed in the intimate atmosphere created by the candlelight. Alice lifted her glass, savoring the red wine slowly as she watched Luis Felipe over the rim of the crystal. "Did you always want to be a CEO?" she asked softly, genuinely curious to know the man beyond the imposing figure she saw every day at the office. An enigmatic smile curved his lips. "Actually, when I was a child, I dreamed of being a pilot." "Really?" Alice smiled, charmed by the unexpected revelation. "My father," he paused, swirling the wine gently between his fingers, "had other plans. The company was the family legacy. Over time, I discovered I had a talent for business as well." A waiter approached silently, serving the appetizer, a delicate composition of scallops with champagne foam. Alice admired the impeccable presentation before them. "And you?" Luis Felipe asked, his dark eyes fixed on her. "Did you always dream of the corporate world?" "Not really," she replied, blushing lightly. "I dreamed of being a writer. I still write sometimes, when I can." His eyes lit up with interest. "What kind of stories?" "Romances, mostly," she admitted, feeling her cheeks grow warmer. "Like ours?" he murmured, his voice lower now as he leaned slightly closer. Alice felt her heart race under the intensity of his gaze. "Ours is still being written," she replied softly. "And how do you imagine it continues?" Luis Felipe asked, his fingers brushing gently against hers on the linen tablecloth. The simple touch sent small electric shocks through her body. Alice took a deep breath, catching his scent mixed with the rich aroma of the wine. "I never imagined I'd be living something like this," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Luis Felipe intertwined his fingers with hers, his thumb drawing slow, gentle circles on her skin. "Neither did I, Alice. You came into my life like a hurricane, awakening feelings I thought had been dormant for a very long time." The main course arrived, filet mignon in red wine sauce with grilled vegetables. The delicious aroma filled the air, but Alice could barely focus on the food, hypnotized by the intensity of his gaze. "Do you know what fascinates me most about you?" he continued, his voice deep and smooth. "The way you are authentic. No masks, no games, just you." "And that's a good thing?" she asked, a playful smile touching her lips. "It's liberating," he replied, lifting her hand to his lips and placing a soft kiss there. "In my world, almost everything is calculated, measured, strategic. But you are real." Alice's heart raced at his words. The way he looked at her, as if she were the only person in the room, made her stomach flutter. "Luis Felipe." She whispered his name, lost in the moment. "I want to know you, Alice," he said, his dark eyes shining in the candlelight. "Every detail, every dream, every fear." He paused briefly. "I want to be part of your story." Dessert arrived, a delicate chocolate mousse with red fruit sauce, but Alice barely noticed it. Every look, every subtle touch from Luis Felipe made her whole body vibrate. "Dance with me," he asked softly, standing and offering his hand. Only then did Alice notice the gentle piano music drifting from the main hall. Her heart pounded as she placed her hand in his and let herself be guided to a small, reserved dance area. Luis Felipe's strong arms wrapped around her, pulling her closer. His scent surrounded her, intoxicating. One large hand rested at her waist, while the other held her hand near his chest. You're so small in my arms, he murmured against her hair as he guided her slowly to the rhythm of the music. Alice could feel his heartbeat beneath her palm, his warmth seeping through the thin fabric of her dress. She lifted her face to meet his intense gaze. "Luis Felipe," she whispered again. He lowered his face slowly, his lips brushing hers in a soft kiss. Nothing like the urgency they had shared in the office. This kiss was about discovery, about promise, making the world spin gently around them. "I want to show you a place," he murmured against her lips when the kiss ended. "Trust me." Minutes later, his Porsche climbed a winding road leading to the highest point in the city. Alice felt her heart beating faster, aware of the occasional glance he cast her way as he drove. He finally stopped at a private overlook, far from the usual tourist spots. The city stretched out below them like a carpet of twinkling lights beneath the starry sky. "Come," he said softly, stepping out to open her door. The night air was cool, and Alice shivered lightly. In a fluid motion, Luis Felipe removed his jacket and placed it over her shoulders. The fabric was still warm, carrying his scent. "It's beautiful," she whispered, gazing at the breathtaking view. "I come here sometimes when I need to think," he revealed, standing behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist, pulling her gently against his chest. "But I've never brought anyone here before." Alice leaned back into him, feeling his strength and presence envelop her completely. His hands caressed her waist through the thin fabric of her dress. "Alice," he murmured against her hair, his voice rough with restrained desire. "You have no idea what you do to me." She turned in his arms, lifting her face to meet his beneath the soft starlight. His eyes burned with intensity. "Show me," she whispered, her hands sliding over his strong chest. He took a breath, then lifted one hand to her face, his fingers tracing the curve of her cheek. "You're so beautiful," he murmured before leaning in to kiss her. The kiss began softly, just a gentle brush of lips beneath the star-filled sky. Below them, the city lights shimmered like thousands of fireflies, creating a magical, romantic scene. Alice's knees weakened as the kiss deepened, but Luis Felipe's strong arms held her securely. His jacket slipped from her shoulders, but she barely noticed the cool night air. The warmth between them was more than enough. "I've never felt anything like this," he confessed between kisses. "You awaken something in me, Alice. Something deep." "I feel it too," she whispered, her hands resting on his broad shoulders. The crescent moon bathed them in silver light, a silent witness to that moment of surrender and discovery. A soft breeze played with Alice's hair, carrying the scent of nearby flowers. "I want to do everything right with you," Luis Felipe said, pulling back just enough to look into her eyes. "No rush, no pressure. I want to win you over every single day." Alice smiled, her heart overflowing. "You already have." They stayed there, wrapped in each other's arms beneath the stars, their hearts beating in the same rhythm as the night unfolded around them. "It's getting late," Luis Felipe murmured eventually, settling his jacket back over her shoulders. "Let me take you home." On the drive back, he kept one hand intertwined with hers over the center console, his thumb drawing slow circles on her skin. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken promises. When they arrived at Alice's building, Luis Felipe stepped out to open her door, offering his hand to help her. In the entrance hall, he pulled her gently into one last kiss, soft, respectful, lingering. "Thank you for the wonderful night," Alice whispered, still wrapped in his arms. "Can I see you tomorrow?" he asked, his dark eyes shining with expectation. "There's a concert in the city park. I thought you might enjoy classical music under the open sky." "I would love that," she replied with a soft smile. "I'll pick you up at 4, he said, leaning in to kiss her forehead with tenderness. "Sleep well, my Alice." Luis Felipe waited until she was safely inside the building, exchanging one last look through the glass door before finally walking back to his car. A gentle smile lingered on his lips as he drove away. Alice climbed the stairs as if she were floating, her heart light and full. Inside her apartment, she leaned against the closed door, still feeling the warmth of his kisses and the echo of his presence. His scent lingered in her memory, and the thought of the next day, full of promise, made her heart sing. Saturday dawned beneath a perfectly blue sky, as if nature itself had conspired to make their meeting even more special. Alice spent the morning drifting between sighs and smiles, replaying every moment of the previous night while carefully choosing what to wear. She settled on a light cotton dress in a soft antique rose tone, one that danced gently with the breeze, perfect for an outdoor concert. She left her hair loose just the way she had noticed Luis Felipe liked it, falling in soft waves around her face. At exactly 4 o'clock, the doorbell rang. When Alice opened the door, her heart raced. Luis Felipe stood there looking effortlessly handsome, dressed in light trousers and a pale blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His silver-streaked hair was slightly tousled by the breeze, revealing a more relaxed, yet equally captivating version of the powerful CEO she knew. "You look beautiful," he said softly, his eyes admiring her as he handed her a small bouquet of wildflowers. "They're lovely," she smiled, inhaling their delicate scent. "Let me put them in water. I brought a surprise for our concert," he added when she returned, gesturing toward an elegant picnic basket. In the car, Alice noticed how much more relaxed Luis Felipe seemed, smiling more easily, his eyes frequently meeting hers with a warm, affectionate glow. The park was beginning to fill when they arrived, but Luis Felipe confidently guided her to a perfect spot beneath a large leafy tree, offering a clear view of the gazebo where the orchestra would perform. "Let me set everything up," he said, spreading a refined blanket over the grass. From the basket he revealed an assortment that made Alice's eyes sparkle. Fine cheeses, fresh fruit, artisan bread, and a perfectly chilled bottle of white wine. "You thought of everything," Alice said with a smile as she settled gracefully onto the blanket, watching him pour the wine into crystal glasses he had brought along. "I want every moment with you to be special," he replied, his dark eyes filled with a tenderness that made her heart melt. The first notes of the orchestra drifted through the afternoon air as sunlight filtered through the leaves above them, casting golden patterns across the blanket. "Mozart," Alice murmured, recognizing the melody as the music wrapped gently around her. Luis Felipe sat close beside her, his back resting against the tree trunk. With thoughtful gestures, he served her small portions of cheese and fruit, occasionally feeding her himself. "Do you like classical music?" he asked softly, his fingers brushing hers as he handed her a grape. "I've always loved it," she replied, her voice almost a sigh at his touch. "My mother used to play the piano when I was little, before she had to sell it." Something crossed Luis Felipe's expression, a mix of admiration and tenderness. He moved closer, naturally wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Tell me about your childhood," he asked, genuinely interested. Alice leaned into him, comforted by his familiar scent, as Mozart's music continued to dance around them. "Well," she began, feeling the warmth of his body against hers, "we lived in a small house in the countryside. My father worked in a factory, and my mother gave piano lessons to help with expenses. On Sunday afternoons, she would play for us. My sister and I would dance around the living room pretending we were ballerinas." Her voice carried a nostalgic softness that made Luis Felipe gently squeeze her shoulder, pulling her a little closer. "And the piano?" he asked quietly. "It was sold when my father fell ill. We needed the money for his medicine." Alice paused, then smiled faintly. "But the memories, no one can take those away." Luis Felipe leaned in and kissed her temple. "You're incredible," he murmured. "That strength, that ability to find beauty even in difficult moments." The orchestra transitioned into Vivaldi, the lively notes of the Four Seasons filling the afternoon air. Alice closed her eyes, letting herself be carried by the music and the moment. "And you?" she asked, turning slightly to look at him. "What was your childhood like?" A different smile appeared on his lips, part nostalgic, part bittersweet. "Very different from yours. I grew up in mansions and boarding schools, surrounded by etiquette lessons and expectations. The only time I felt truly free was when I'd sneak onto the roof at night to watch the stars." "Do you still like stargazing?" Alice asked softly. Now I have something even more beautiful to look at, he replied, his dark eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her heart race. Alice felt warmth rise to her cheeks. Luis Felipe lifted a hand, gently caressing her face with the back of his fingers. You look even more beautiful when you blush, he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. The orchestra began a romantic Strauss waltz, and several couples rose to dance on the grass nearby. Dance with me? Luis Felipe asked, standing and extending his hand. Here? Alice smiled, glancing around. Why not? He said, his eyes shining. The music is perfect. The setting is perfect. He paused, then added softly, You are perfect. With a shy smile, Alice placed her hand in his. He drew her into his arms, one hand resting at her waist, the other holding hers close to his chest. Relax, he whispered near her ear, guiding her gently to the rhythm. Let the music lead us. She felt his heartbeat beneath her palm, his masculine scent blending with the soft afternoon breeze. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, painting light and shadow over them as they danced. I never imagined I could feel like this, she confessed quietly. Like what? He asked, his voice a warm murmur. So complete. As if the rest of the world disappears when I'm with you. Luis Felipe stopped dancing for a moment, his eyes diving into hers with such intensity that Alice caught her breath. Slowly, he leaned in, capturing her lips in a soft, lingering kiss. The sun began to set, coloring the sky in shades of pink and gold as the orchestra shifted to Beethoven. The deep, romantic notes of the Moonlight Sonata filled the air, creating an almost unreal atmosphere. It's getting cooler, he murmured against her lips, noticing her slight shiver. Let's go back to our blanket. Back at the picnic spot, Luis Felipe sat with his back against the tree and gently pulled Alice to sit between his legs, her back resting against his chest. He wrapped a light blanket around them both, his arms encircling her waist. Better? He asked softly, his warm breath near her ear. Perfect. Alice sighed, nestling closer. The sky was now fully lit with stars, the soft glow from the gazebo lights bathing them in gold. The park smelled of flowers and fresh grass, and the music continued to drift through the night air. It's getting late, Luis Felipe said after a comfortable silence. May I take you to dinner? I know the perfect place to celebrate. Alice smiled and turned to face him. We could stay a little longer, she said gently. The music, the stars. Everything feels so right. His smile warmed instantly. Your wishes are my orders, my Alice. He pulled her closer, their fingers intertwining as they watched the night unfold to the sound of the orchestra, their hearts beating in the same rhythm. Alice, Luis Felipe began, his voice deep and emotional. I know it may seem soon, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You walked into my world and changed everything. Will you be my girlfriend? Her heart raced as a radiant smile spread across her face. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Luis Felipe. The final chord of the orchestra echoed softly through the park, signaling the end of the concert. Around them, people began to stand and leave, but Alice and Luis Felipe remained there a little longer, wrapped in their own small, perfect world. Now I really am taking you to dinner, he said, rising to his feet and extending his hands to help her up with precise, elegant movements. As soon as Alice stood, he began carefully gathering the picnic items. Let me help, she offered. He shook his head with a soft smile. Tonight you're my princess. Just enjoy. On the way to the restaurant, Alice noticed Luis Felipe steering toward the historic district of the city, where old buildings preserved their original architecture. He stopped in front of a beautifully restored 19th-century mansion, its tall windows glowing warmly against the night. Villa Toscana, he announced as he stepped out to open her door. The best Italian cuisine in the city. Inside, the restaurant felt like a dream, painted in shades of gold and deep red. Crystal chandeliers scattered a soft, intimate light across the room, while a pianist played gently in the corner, enhancing the romantic atmosphere. Mr. Deniz, the maitre d' greeted him with a warm smile. Your table is ready as always. They were led to a more private area near a window overlooking an illuminated garden. Luis Felipe pulled out Alice's chair, his fingers brushing lightly against her bare shoulders in the process. "This place is magical," Alice whispered, taking in the beauty around her. "Not as magical as your smile," he replied, his dark eyes reflecting the candlelight. "May I order for us?" Luis Felipe asked gently, never breaking eye contact. "There's a house specialty I think you'll love." Alice felt enchanted by the way the candlelight softened his usually serious features. The pianist shifted to a romantic melody that flowed through the space as the sommelier approached with a bottle of red wine. After a brief nod of approval from Luis Felipe, the wine was poured into fine crystal glasses. "To us," he proposed, his deep voice filled with emotion. "To the beginning of our story. To us," Alice replied softly as their glasses clinked. The first course arrived, lobster ravioli in a champagne sauce, and Alice couldn't suppress a quiet sigh after her first bite. "Approved?" he asked with a satisfied smile. "It's divine," she answered, her eyes shining. As they ate, conversation flowed easily. They talked about everything and nothing, discovering more about each other with every passing moment. Alice spoke of her dreams of becoming a writer, while Luis Felipe revealed his secret passion for photography. "You know," he said at one point, leaning closer across the table, "I've never felt so much like myself with anyone before." His hand found hers on the linen tablecloth, their fingers interlacing naturally. The small pendant shaped like a musical note around Alice's neck shimmered softly in the candlelight. "What do you mean?" she asked gently, her thumb brushing his fingers. Luis Felipe took a sip of wine as if searching for the right words. "For years I lived behind a mask," he admitted. "The relentless CEO, the successful businessman. It was easier to keep everyone at a distance." His gaze locked onto hers. "But with you, I can simply be myself." The waiter arrived with the main course, filet medallions in red wine sauce with mushroom risotto, briefly interrupting the moment. "And who are you, really?" Alice asked, once they were alone again, genuinely curious. A soft smile curved his lips. "A man who still gets moved by sunsets, who keeps a secret collection of poetry books, who dreams of one day photographing the northern lights." He paused, his thumb stroking her hand. "A man who was lost, until he found you." Piano music filled the room as they finished dinner. When dessert arrived, a delicate tiramisu, Luis Felipe held Alice's hand gently. "Alice," he said softly, "I'd really like to meet your parents. I know they live in the countryside, and if you allow it, I'd love to visit them next weekend." Her eyes widened with surprise and emotion. You really want to meet them?" "Of course," he replied with a tender smile. "They're an important part of your life. I want to know everything that makes up your world." Alice's smile lit up her face, warming Luis Felipe's heart. In that moment, he knew he would do anything to see that smile every day of his life. The days following their decision to be together felt like a dream to Alice. Every moment with Luis Felipe only deepened her certainty that she was living something rare and special. Still, on Monday morning, as she stepped into the imposing headquarters of Denise Enterprises, a flicker of nervousness crept in. How would things be now, in a professional environment? Her worries quickly faded. Luis Felipe was waiting in the lobby, impeccable in a navy blue suit, a discreet yet meaningful smile on his lips. "Good morning, my Alice," he said softly, leaning in to place a gentle kiss on her forehead. Then, with the same authority that had always defined him, he escorted her to the elevator. His posture made it clear to everyone around them that there was no room for gossip or speculation. He was the CEO, after all, and his personal choices were not open to debate. Inside the executive elevator, Luis Felipe maintained a professional demeanor, but whenever his eyes met Alice's, they overflowed with affection. His woody cologne filled the enclosed space, making her heart race as it always did. Later that morning, in the conference room, his deep, commanding voice echoed clearly. "Before we begin," he said, "I'd like to inform you that Miss Pereira and I are in a relationship, I expect the same level of professionalism that has always characterized this company." His tone left no room for discussion. No one dared to comment. Throughout the day, Luis Felipe remained the demanding, focused leader everyone knew. In meetings, he treated Alice with the same professional seriousness as always, though his eyes gleamed with pride whenever she stood out by her own merit. At the end of the workday, he surprised her at her desk. "Ready to meet my future in-laws this weekend?" he asked softly, only for her to hear. On Friday afternoon, Luis Felipe's car left the city, heading toward the countryside. Alice watched the scenery change through the window, tall buildings giving way to greener, quieter landscapes. "Nervous?" she asked, noticing how he occasionally adjusted his tie, a gesture she had already learned was a sign of anxiety. "A little," he admitted with a smile. "I really want your parents to like me." Alice smiled, touched by this vulnerable side of the powerful CEO. He had chosen a more casual outfit for the occasion, light dress pants and a pale blue shirt, though his natural elegance remained unmistakable. After 2 hours on the road, they arrived in the small town where Alice had grown up. Cobblestone streets and modest houses told the story of a place where time seemed to move more slowly. Her parents' home was simple but welcoming, with a small garden out front where her mother grew roses. Before they even stepped out of the car, Mrs. Marisa appeared at the door, her face glowing with warmth. "My daughter!" she exclaimed, embracing Alice as soon as she stepped out. Then she turned to Luis Felipe with curious, welcoming eyes. "Mom, this is Luis Felipe," Alice introduced, her heart pounding as the two very different worlds of her life met. "Welcome to our home," Mrs. Marisa said warmly. Mr. Antonio, Alice's father, soon joined them. He was a simple man, with hands marked by years of labor, but his expressive eyes mirrored his daughter's. "So this is the man who stole my little girl's heart," he said, extending his hand. The handshake was firm and respectful. Luis Felipe immediately felt the weight of responsibility. These were the people who had raised and protected Alice, who had shaped the extraordinary woman he had fallen in love with. "It's an honor to meet you," he said sincerely. Come in, Mrs. Marisa urged. "Lunch is almost ready. I made that country-style chicken you love so much, Alice." The interior of the house was simple yet immaculate. Family photos decorated the walls, and Luis Felipe smiled when he spotted a picture of Alice as a child, her hair in pigtails and a mischievous grin on her face. The aroma of homemade food filled the space, so different from the refined restaurants he was used to, yet infinitely warmer. And in that moment, Luis Felipe understood something deeply. This was where Alice's strength, warmth, and authenticity had been born, and he felt grateful to be welcomed into that world. The lunch that followed was simple, warm, and filled with laughter. Stories flowed easily around the table, memories were shared, and time seemed to slow down. Luis Felipe surprised himself by how comfortable he felt in that modest home, so different from the polished environments he was used to. There was something deeply grounding about the sincerity of that place, about the way Alice laughed freely beside her parents. At the end of the afternoon, as they prepared to leave, Mrs. Marisa embraced Luis Felipe with genuine maternal affection. Her hug was warm and unguarded, as if she had already accepted him as part of the family. Mr. Antonio shook his hand once more, firm as before, but now accompanied by a look of quiet approval. That simple gesture carried more meaning than words ever could. During the drive back to the city, Luis Felipe held Alice's hand while keeping his eyes on the road. The countryside passed by through the windshield, bathed in the soft colors of sunset. "Your family is wonderful," he said sincerely. "Now I understand even more where your strength comes from. And your heart." Alice smiled, resting her head lightly against his shoulder, feeling a deep sense of peace. 9 months passed after that first visit to Alice's family. During that time, their relationship matured naturally, built on trust, respect, and shared dreams. They visited her parents often on weekends, and Alice gradually adapted to Luis Felipe's sophisticated world without ever losing her essence. At work, she grew remarkably. She became even more respected, eventually coordinating her own team in the finance department. Luis Felipe watched her flourish, proud not because she was by his side, but because of her own merit, intelligence, and dedication. Every day, he found new reasons to fall in love with her all over again. On a special evening, close to the anniversary of their first year together, Luis Felipe knew it was time for the next step. That night, his apartment overlooking the city had been meticulously prepared. Scented candles spread a soft glow throughout the space. The table on the balcony was set with refined elegance: crystal glasses, fine porcelain, white flowers, everything carefully chosen to create an intimate, romantic atmosphere. Alice looked breathtaking in a midnight blue dress. Her hair fell freely over her shoulders, framing her delicate features. Throughout dinner, they reminisced about their journey together, laughing softly at shared memories. Luis Felipe, usually so controlled, appeared slightly nervous. When dessert was served, he stood up, walked toward her, and slowly knelt. His dark eyes shimmered with emotion as he removed a small velvet box from his pocket. "Alice," he said, his voice thick with feeling, "you transformed my life in every possible way. You brought light, love, and meaning to my days. Will you give me the honor of becoming my wife?" Inside the box rested a platinum ring with a stunning solitaire that caught the candlelight. Tears filled Alice's eyes as a radiant smile spread across her face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." With trembling hands, Luis Felipe slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been created just for her. He stood, pulled her into his arms, and kissed her with all the love and devotion overflowing in his heart. The months that followed were filled with wedding preparations. Luis Felipe insisted on giving Alice the ceremony of her dreams, always respecting her taste for simple, timeless elegance. They chose a historic chapel for the ceremony and the most luxurious hotel in the city for the reception. The wedding was set for spring, when the gardens would be in full bloom. Alice chose a gown by the most renowned designer in the country: French lace, refined and ethereal. Her mother cried the moment she saw her during the first fitting. The wedding morning dawned perfect. The sky was clear, a gentle breeze dancing through the flowers. At the hotel, Alice watched her reflection in the mirror as the makeup artist finished the final touches. The dress was a dream of lace and silk, with a delicate open back and a flowing yet restrained train. Her hair was styled in a low chignon, with soft strands framing her face. The French tulle veil completed the look flawlessly. At the chapel, adorned with white flowers and candles, Luis Felipe waited at the altar, impeccable in his tuxedo, his silver hair perfectly styled. When the doors opened and Alice appeared, time seemed to stop. Their eyes met and everything else faded away. Mr. Antonio, emotional and proud in his new suit, walked his daughter down the aisle. Luis Felipe's eyes filled with tears as she approached. During the vows, their voices trembled. Luis Felipe promised to love and protect her for all his days. Alice vowed to be his partner, his confidant, his eternal love. When they were declared husband and wife, the kiss they shared was gentle, profound, and full of promise. The reception was a vision in white and gold. Thousands of tiny lights shimmered like stars beneath crystal chandeliers. Orchids and white roses perfumed the air. As the night unfolded, the newlyweds moved among their guests, exchanging smiles that spoke of everything still to come. Later, under the moonlit sky, Luis Felipe gently led Alice away from the celebration. The presidential suite awaited them, transformed into a sanctuary of romance. Rose petals traced a path to the bedroom, candles casting a golden glow. Champagne rested in a silver bucket. He carried her across the threshold, following tradition. The night unfolded with tenderness and devotion, every touch a promise, every kiss a reaffirmation of love. Morning arrived softly. Sunlight filtered through the curtains as they lay entwined in silk sheets. "Good morning, Mrs. Denise," Luis Felipe murmured, kissing her shoulder. "Good morning, my husband," Alice replied, smiling. They shared breakfast on the balcony: fresh fruit, warm bread, aromatic coffee, and Alice's favorite indulgence, hot chocolate with whipped cream. Later, dressed for travel, they boarded a private jet bound for the Maldives. As the city lights faded behind them, Luis Felipe kissed her forehead. "Happy?" he asked. More than I ever imagined possible, she answered. And so, the CEO and the woman who changed his life began a new chapter, a love story proving that when two hearts truly meet, no barrier is strong enough to stand against real love. Subscribe to the channel and help us reach our goal. Your like is very important to support this work. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and how far this video has reached. Sending you a big hug, and see you in the next story.